thank you very much indeed, John Newell at Nestlé in York, for joining us at Confectionery Productions to talk about your role as an ingredients advisor to the company. So can you kindly start off by telling us a bit about your role and how it plays a place in product development for the company?
Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, so I'm the corporate ingredient advisor for cocoa, focusing on cocoa liquor and cocoa beans. So part of that is, the more administrative job of managing specifications. Also involves giving technical assistance to our factories, and there's also a component of innovation, which is really important for building our business. We think about innovation. There's innovating. You know, Developing or optimizing processes. There's developing or optimizing products as well. I think for me, the part that I find really interesting and passionate, I'm really interested in, is basically kind of making the connection between the ingredients that you're using. What are the characteristics of the ingredients that you're using? How do those change through the process that you're using, whether that's maybe a fermentation process or some type of cooking or flavor development process, and then what you get out in the end as far as a product, and kind of making links to trying to understand what's going on within that whole
Fantastic stuff.
process.
And you've been with the company a long time now at Nestle, for over 20 years, and your background is
Yes.
in molecular biology, I understand. So can you tell us about your original passion for the industry and how you got into
Exactly.
it? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So I originally started out with a degree in microbiology, and started out very much in very fundamental research. So I was looking at gene expression, human gene expression, and while because I'm someone who's I'm technical. When you work in R&D, you have to be curious. So I'm someone who's curious. Always interested in figuring out how things work, or understanding things, or understanding stuff. And so yeah, so the fundamental research was interesting, but I always wanted to do something more applied. So I've actually moved. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you can kind of see I've kind of moved from fundamental to a little bit more applied, and more applied, and more applied, which has been really good because I've been exposed to, I think about microbiology. I'm really aware of all the potential quality risks that there might be. I mean, the quality risks, but also the benefits that you get uh, different microbes, fermentation processes. Um, yeah, so I've experienced, very really fundamental through to lab work, a little bit more applied lab work, kitchen, pilot plant, and even to working, for example, commissioning some lines in our factories, which is really good. So I think it's great. I mean, I'm really happy that I kind of have that end-to-end view, basically from fundamental lab work all the way through to like a real production environment.
So these days you're based in the UK, and
Mm.
the York office is there, the HQ of the KitKat brand, which I've been very fortunate to visit in the past year or two. And what excites you about being part of the company at the heart of the production there?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's kind of part of my journey of moving from um, fundamental to more applied research, is my passion for food. Because I've always been, I mean, I love food, and confectionery, whether that's, pastries or chocolates or cakes. And so that was part of another interest for me, years ago when I did move to York, was that love of chocolate. And it was the logical next step for me from working in Lausanne. The logical next step was for me to move to York, which is really the home of chocolate and confectionery R&D within Nestlé. So yeah, I mean, the York environment is really, it's really great. I shouldn't say it's unique, because several of our, as you may know, within Nestlé, we have these Nestlé product technology centers, where, for example, the Center of Confectionery Research is in York, and we do process development, product development, and then we basically support our global factories. And it's the same for other product categories, whether that's culinary or things like that. Yeah, so it's, and the NPTC is the, and research within Nestle in general. It's a really great working environment, because it's a company which has, we have quite a good critical mass of expertise within the company. And for example, in York, we have a chocolate department, wafer department. We have engineers, the pilot plant, kitchen, sensory, the design team. So I think from a product perspective, it's great, because you can basically do everything from the initial kitchen work, development, designing stuff, whether that's packaging or processes, and coming out with a finished product, and then kind of handing that over to our factories. So I think from a product process standpoint, it's really interesting because you have that end to end. You have all the, most of the competencies or things that you need in house, which allows you to do things really nicely and seamlessly. And then, of course, from a personal perspective, I mean, yeah, Nestle is a very international company, and from on a personal level, um, yeah, I don't know how many nationalities there are, but it's really great working in a location which is really international. Um, people speaking different languages. I mean, I myself speak French, and my German's not too bad either. And it's just, yeah, I find it more, it's mentally stimulating to be in an environment like that where you have different cultures, people coming from different backgrounds, and working on different things in different ways, different
And
expertise.
in terms of just seeing the finished product there that you may have had an input into, it must be
Mm.
quite special from your own, personal level, seeing, your own involvement in the creation of these products.
Exactly, and that's, yeah, exactly. Hit the nail on the head. So it is really rewarding when you're working on something, and we are working in R&D. So I mean, it's oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but as you can imagine, in R&D environment, it's about research, and you search and research, and you develop things. Things don't always work, and it's about taking the risks. So when things are working on, when they work smoothly, work nicely, and you see a product actually on the shelf, it's really
And
rewarding.
just in terms of some of the challenges of your work on a day-to-day level there,
Mm.
how difficult is it sort of taking, sort of key ingredients and then working up towards finished items there? Must be quite
Yeah,
challenging.
it is. I mean, there's different challenges. I think on my day-to-day job, there's different types of challenges. I mean, of course, one, and that's common to all, you know, project managers, or a lot of people, most people working in a business environment, is stakeholder management. That's one of the most challenging parts of project management, I think, in general. That's from more of an administrative side. But then on the product or process development side, yeah, within Nestle, I mean, we are kind of pushing the limits to what we're expected, and we do things that are completely new. We're not there to do in York, like a simple swap over of flavors. We do things which are much more challenging. And you may have seen that a few years ago. We invented the world's first chocolate made from, it's like the world's first 70% dark chocolate made from nothing but what's inside the cocoa pod.
Yes.
And this is really groundbreaking. And it was really a demonstration of what we can do as a company. We can set ourselves a really challenging goal. How do you take the pulp, which is high in sugar, is liquid, uh, that needs to be dried. It's going to be really hygroscopic. It's going to be difficult to work with. How do you get that? How do you put that into a product, and into a chocolate, which you know most people work in chocolate. You don't ever want to mix moisture or water with chocolate, because it goes really thick, and it's impossible to work with afterwards. So yeah, it's really the working on really challenging concepts like that, and trying to again understand the characteristics of the material, the ingredients that you're working with, how that changes through the process. And sometimes you have intermediate process, A, and after that you put that into a chocolate mass, whether that's maybe a dried powder, or maybe that's some type of inclusions. But it's really trying to understand how all of that fits together.
Obviously, we met up last month at Chocotech in Cologne there, and your presentation was very much around the notion
Mm.
of flavour pairings there, and some of the key points from your presentation included looking at some quite innovative flavours, like using whiskey within chocolate. Now, how challenging is it to create a product based on that?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the concept. I mean, as you rightly mentioned, so we launched the barrel aged KitKat, which was yeah, it is something really new. So that was launched in Japan, in the KitKat Chocolatory, and we also launched it later in Brazil. Um, so yeah, I mean, it did involve a bit of process development and product development. Selection of trying to come up with a way of doing it, because it's not something that which is, openly. They're not. We didn't have instructions exactly how to go about that process, that infusion process. How do you infuse these flavors from the single malt whiskey barrels into the cocoa? Yeah, so um, that was a really interesting but really rewarding project. So I mean, in the beginning, you had this idea of, what would happen if you aged cocoa in single malt whiskey barrels? Um, so basically, I developed the first initial prototypes with our team in Bro in Switzerland, and basically choosing the barrels. I mean, I'm not a big drinker of whiskey, but if I do drink a whiskey, I like nice whiskey with a lot of character. For example, Lafroig was my favorite whiskey. Yeah, so the initial prototypes, we basically, and actually for the launch, we basically used single malt whiskey barrels. Whiskey that had this really characteristic smoky, peaty flavor, and the flavor it goes so well with dark chocolate. And what's really great as well, because you put these nibs, the cocoa, into the whiskey barrels. You let them mature for 30 days or so, um, and afterwards, the downstream processing that remains largely unchanged. And what's really great is that you get this in the dark chocolate. You do get this kind of smoky, peaty, really characteristic single malt whiskey flavor notes, but you don't have any of the harsh alcohol notes that you normally expect. For example, if you buy a whiskey chocolate in your local chocolate shop, normally that you can taste whiskey, but then it has that kind of stinging alcohol flavor as well. But we didn't have that at all in our dark chocolate. And then, after we developed that chocolate, applying it in a KitKat, it was great because that characteristic flavor, is still fed through into the finished KitKat, and it gave a really fantastic flavor delivery. So on the flavor side, is fantastic. As you may have seen, it was launched on small scale, small launch. But what was really interesting, while it was launched in Brazil, as it launched while the product was initially launched in Japan, we got really good media coverage, not just in Japan, but actually the media coverage went global. So we had articles in Forbes magazine, CNN Travel. So yeah, it was really rewarding to see that in the press as well, not just a small launch, limited edition launch in Japan, but the press as well. So yeah, it was really rewarding.
Are you hopeful that those kind of premium flavors might somehow make their way more into the mainstream, as we were discussing previously? Is that something that you think may happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We're always looking out for new ways to, excite consumers. Consumers are. It depends on the consumers. Some consumers are happy with the same product. They don't want the product to change at all. Like think about the classic KitKat. Some consumers, they don't want you to change or touch that at all because they love that taste, love that flavor. But there are other consumers who are looking out for something new, and something new taste experiences, new texture experiences. They're also interested in, if you think about some of the common, like the modern trends, it's all about natural authenticity, and what they'd also like to have is a story behind it. Ideally, some type of an interesting story or an inspiring story behind it. So, first of all, it's definitely the taste, and that's, if you ask anyone, if your product doesn't taste good, it's not going to go anywhere. So it's taste, and ideally a great story to go with it as well. And that's why the
Yes.
whiskey barrel aged worked so well. It was the taste, and whiskey, as you probably know, in Japan, whiskey is it's really big. It's really well. I mean, they produce their own whiskeys, and so that product and that concept resonated really well with consumers in Japan. So afterwards, Nestle, we're always on the lookout for the latest trends. Um, and the approach that we take more within Nestle today, we take more of a test and learn approach. So instead of I mean, in some cases we do go directly to large scale launches, but and sometimes if we're working on some really new, I don't know if you call that cutting edge or not, but some really new concepts. Instead of going straight towards an industrial launch, we'll do a test and learn launch. So basically, we launch the products at a smaller scale, which is great because it actually allows us to launch the products more quickly. Uh, we're able to adapt quicker to the consumer trends as well. We can get feedback from consumers early on, and it mitigates the risk of a larger scale launch. And then basically, with the results of those small scale launches, they can be used to optimize the products or the processes based on the feedback of or the design of the product based on the feedback of the consumers.